Wendell Cox is the principal. I love this title. He's the principal of demographia. What that means. Anyway, I should laugh. He'll explain. He was also a 3-term member of the L.A. County Transportation Commission. And back in 2008, he co-authored, along with another guy who's been on our show quite a few times, Joe Vranich, the business relocation coach who keeps track of companies that leave California. Companies. Anyway, he wrote this report for the Reason Foundation. It's called the Due Diligence Report on the High-Speed Rail System, which he writes outlined virtually all the problems so many people are aware of now. And this report actually came out before the 2008 election. Too bad every voter didn't read it. Wendell, welcome to the John and Ken Show.
Pleasure to be with you.
Just explain, Principle of Demographia. What is that?
Demographia is an international consulting firm dealing in demographics, transportation, and land use.
And your title is Principal. I like that.
Principal, yeah, you bet.
You're not president, vice president. You're the principal.
Got to be unique, you know.
All right. Explain how you put together this research. And when did you do this? You did this in 2008 before the November vote?
Yeah, it was done in 2008, but I've stayed close to the project and been watching it very closely. I did a report on the Florida high-speed rail program in 1996 in Florida, which Jeb Bush used to kill the project there. I also did a report in 2011, which was used by Governor Scott and credited to kill the program there. I've been following high-speed rail for a long time.
Now, are you saying that in Ohio and Florida, the proposals were full of just as many distortions and lies as California's?
No, actually, I think California sets a record. I've been following public policy for quite some period of time. I have never seen such deceit as I see with respect to this high-speed rail project. I mean, there's nothing even close to genuine about this project.
Well, where do we want to start, Wendell? We've gone over a lot of the problems, too, but you certainly did the research to know in detail. What do you think is the worst violation from the proposal to the reality?
Well, the worst violation is the terrible extent to which the project is not living up to the claims that it was were made to the voters to pass the referendum. However, you look back at our report in 2008. We projected that costs would increase based upon the international evidence, and in fact, they increased far more than we even projected. The project is claimed to be environmentally good, and it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, yet there's no serious study of that, and our examination of their data indicated that for every ton of greenhouse gas emission it would take out of the air, it would cost $1,800, which is 36 times the United Nations maximum standard. And in fact, I think one of the things that hasn't been said in the more recent discussions, but I'll basically suggest I have serious questions as to whether Governor Brown and the people at the High Speed Rail Authority are even serious about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Because if they were, they would be not looking to such an expensive program to do it. If they're really concerned about rising sea levels and all of that kind of thing, they should be out there seeking the most cost-effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But they're not. And this is the real tragedy, that we have these people proposing to use cap-and-trade revenues.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it looks to me like pork and slush. That's all it is.
Yeah, and, dealing with the quality of the air, the real complaint, as I understand it, is that if they start construction in the Central Valley, which already has severe air quality problems, the construction, which is going to take quite a while, 10 to 20 years, is going to really, really further damage the air there.
No question about it. And there's a University of California report that says it'll take 70 years to recover the damage.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, no, this thing is a real loser any way you want to look at it. I mean, the ridership figures are bloated. It's costing much more than it should. And frankly, it's going to make no difference in traffic congestion or in air congestion.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, because I know you examine more closely, because Jerry Brown loves to tell reporters that if we don't build this high-speed rail system, what are we going to do with all of the traffic, both on the ground with the cars and in the air with the airplanes? It's going to cost so much to build all the capacity to get people the room they need in the planes and the sky and also on the freeways, but you said that was overstated, too.
Overstated to an extent of like 30 times. Give you an idea. The most recent business plan out of April basically assumes that we would have to build enough highway capacity to deal with twice as many seats as the trains will have in 2040, 7 times as many trains, and mileage that is 70% more than the length of the route. We are talking about some of the most misleading information that has come out of any organization, public or private. Yeah. So it is an absolute sham, and anybody that repeats those specious numbers should be ashamed of themselves. But it's even worse. Then you look at the airline figures. Now, the consultant for the High-Speed Rail Authority notes that the average airplane between L.A. and San Francisco carries 135 people. That is, it has 135 seats.
Yeah.
What do they assume in this plan that is going to cause, when they basically try to suggest we got to build high-speed rail to avoid expanding airports and building new runways? They assume plane sizes of 70 people. When is the last time anybody got on a plane at LAX and went to SFO on a plane with 70 seats?
No, not me. It's always full.
Well, beyond that, 70 seats are what we run between Fresno and Madera. That's not what we run on major routes. So again, no need to expand airport capacity. So this whole idea that we can't afford the additional capacity, and it's also, by the way, to some degree based upon the assumption that California will grow much faster than it's growing. I mean, the State Department of Finance overstated, and I shouldn't say overstated, overprojected, because nobody can project the future accurately. They overprojected the growth rate in the last decade by 100%. and so, I mean, I did an op-ed for the Orange County Register 4 years ago when they came out with a projection for 60 million people by 2050 in California and said, wake up and smell the coffee. It's not going to happen. I mean, you've talked to Joe Vranich. You know about the exodus of businesses. You know that 1.5 million people moved out of California to other states in the last decade. Well, now the USC Saul Price School of Regional Planning has come out with a report that says, no, in 2050 we're going to have 51 million people, not 60. I'll bet more like 45, quite frankly.
All right, when we come back, I'll ask you a couple more questions. I'm talking to Wendell Cox. His title is Principal of Demographia. It's a consulting company. He was also at one time a 3-term member of the LA County Transportation Commission, and he has been studying and writing about high-speed rail systems throughout the U.S. He mentioned Florida and Ohio, and he says that California is the worst. The lies, the distortions to sell the high-speed rail brown doggle to people it's unbelievable. When we come back, I'll talk to him more about this because he makes another good point. They did a research paper back in 2008 for the Reason Foundation about all the lies and distortions that they're trying to sell us with the high-speed rail. And one thing he wants to point out, I want to get to this as soon as we come back, is that in other countries, we're always told we got to catch up with the rest of the world with the use of the high-speed rail system. Now, he'll tell you exactly who rides high-speed rail in the other countries of the world and why it won't work in California, where you might have guessed, most people already in the state do not use any kind of rail. So John and Ken, high-speed rail, the brown doggle, the brown street, they lied about the total cost. They even lied about how much it'll cost to maintain high-speed rail. They lied about the ridership. They lied about how much you'd have to pay to ride the high-speed rail. They lied about what would happen if we don't get high-speed rail in terms of how much we'd have to build more freeways and more airport capacity. They lie about so many things. It's almost, I can't remember anything we've ever talked about concerning government. And they lied about how much private investment there would be. And as it turns out, and I'm looking at an editorial written or co-written by our guest, who I'll get back on in a moment, that according to this editorial, it's the now canceled federal high-speed rail program. As we talked about in the last segment, governors in Florida and Ohio said no to building high-speed rail, even though they were, they dangled federal bribe money, stimulus money in front of them. They said, no, it's not worth it. We're not doing it. And now, according to this Wall Street Journal opinion piece, it's actually a canceled program. I mean, Obama's dangled a couple of $2 billion, pretty much mandating that they start high-speed rail in the Central Valley, and I'll talk about that a little bit more after 5:30. And it's hard to believe that this is still on the table and could move forward. Let's get Wendell Cox back on the show, principal of Demographia, also a 3-term member of the LA County Transportation Commission. Something else I noticed, Wendell, that you and Joe Vranich wrote when you were looking at this back in 2008, even more recently, an opinion piece in January in the Wall Street Journal, is because one of the other things that Brown and the politicians in Sacramento love to tout is that we're behind the rest of the world. The rest of the world, Japan and countries of Europe like Spain, have high-speed rail. It's time that California catch up with the rest of the world. But we don't have the experience with rail usage here in California that they do in other countries, and I think you have more to say on that.
Well, yeah, exactly. But more importantly, none of those systems make money. All of them required huge subsidies.
That's true.
You think about our airport system. Our airport system, including the airports themselves, is paid for by taxes on tickets by people that fly. Our intercity highway system, the freeways that ribbon through California, were paid for by fuel taxes, by people who drive on them. And I'll be the first to support high-speed rail when a system is proposed that actually can support itself. But, for example, the Brazilians are learning a real good lesson from these, promoters of high-speed rail who claim there's all sorts of private investment and billions sitting around for the private sector to invest in it. Brazil has put out to bid for a privately financed system from Rio de Janeiro to Sao Paulo twice, and they haven't even gotten a bid. So, I mean, there are only 2 relatively short segments of high-speed rail that have actually paid their cost. Everywhere else, there are huge subsidies, and, of course, that's going to be the case in California as well.
Well, why do you think here in California they're stubbornly hanging on to this?
Well, the money. I mean, you got $3 billion worth of federal money they want. I mean, I have a friend in the peninsula that writes about this all the time. He says basically this is not about transportation, and I tell you for sure this is not about transportation because we have plenty of that. This is about the money. The purpose of this project is to spend money
on their friends.
I don't know well enough.
Or to say I created jobs because it's a tough economy in the Central Valley? Is that all there is to this?
Listen, the same kinds of pressure go on all over the world. There are a lot of people that make a lot of money on this. We have huge consulting firms, billion-dollar consulting firms that make money at this. We have huge foreign car manufacturers. By car, I mean train manufacturers. This is all about lobbying and special interests. Okay? Now, and the basic point is, in the final analysis, this will end up costing the people of California probably $50, $60, $70 billion because there's not going to be much more in the way of not going to be any more in the way of federal aid. And what will they have? Something that's slower than a plane and more expensive than a car, and nobody would get out of their car to ride it, and few will get off a plane to ride it.
And even if it's finished, if it's not finished, we'll probably just have one segment collecting dust somewhere in the Central Valley. All right, Wendell, thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you.
All right, it's